All right, I'm gonna. So, I'll be seeing you. Okay, good.
I'll sit down here with him. Hi, how are you? It's good to see you. Okay. College mayor of the How are you? Good.
Beautiful day.
Looking good.
Time to go. Your kind attention, please. The mayor. Okay. Is it the Greenway meeting is now called to order, and the first order of business, Sarah.
Is the Pledge of Allegiance. It will all stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And that's a picture of you up there, Mark, too. That's right. Now then we do.
Yes, what we usually do, as always, is to go around the room and introduce ourselves. We'll start from to our left.
Okay. I'm Barney McKenna, and I have the honor of being co-counsel, co-chair with Sarah.
Anything more, Supervisor Hector?
Civic Lancetta, Conservancy
Oh,
Board.
there's a letter.
Tim Wiedemann, Kingston Land Trust, yes.
Sakina Brown, representing Senator Stokes Reno.
Bill Gordon, New York State Water and Transportation.
Eric Kane, representing Assembly Woman in Barrett.
Frank Woody, Department of Agriculture and Markets.
Jennifer Schwartz Berkey, Conservancy Board and Greenway Secretary. Conservancy Board. Tom Ritter, Renton County Community and Council Member.
Frank Bergman, Hudson River Lookout.
Fran Montalvo, Department of Environmental Conservation.
Freddie Garcia, representing Dennis Murray from Marist.
And Betsy Jacks, the director of the Thomas Cole National Historic Site.
Kevin Burke, Treasurer, Greenway.
Jane Cochran, Conservancy Board.
Kristen Brown, Conservancy Board.
Sally Mazzarella, Council Board.
Sam Howard, Greenway staff.
Morning, Jimmy here with the Department of State.
Johanna Poor, Orange County Survey.
Sarah Olson, National Park Service.
Marcus DeGreen, Greenway.
And then Stefan.
Stefan Yarbeck, Conservancy and National Heritage Area Board.
And then let's go from the, review.
Sure. Michael Reed, the Walkill Valley Rail Trail Association.
Alan Senator, Marlboro Citizen. Joshua Simons, Creos and Falls.
Aaron Zimmer, Thompson, Board of Advisory Board.
Valley Vista, Office residents, Kingston Town House, and that's with Heritage and Randall and Environmental Resources Board, the walking programs.
Mike Malone, Town of Somers.
Michael Blau, Village Administrator, Tarrytown.
Amy Casella, City Council.
Jeff Antonino, Scenic Hudson.
Nancy Cozine, Volunteer Revitalization Committee, and today I want to thank the Green Gyms grant people. We began planting $1,500 worth of flowers on College Hill, a long restoration project, and thank you all very much.
Linda Aldrich, late arriving member of the Communities Council.
You're right on. Glenn Gadali, Barton and Judas Engineering, good morning.
Natalie Chung, teaching Hudson Valley.
Carl Beard with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program.
Fred Osborne, Taconic Region Commissioner for State Parks.
Carrie Kressler, Albany County.
Scott Siegel with the Albany County Executive's Office.
Could you pass that mic back to Rita Aldrich? When would you explain your new job that you, because this is going to be part of your turf, so to speak.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's not really a new job, but there is a wonderful organization supporting the National Park Service here in Hyde Park called the Roosevelt Vanderbilt Conservancy. We established it about 3 years ago. Its first big project is recreating Mrs. James Roosevelt's enormous and hugely productive vegetable and fruit garden, which for 65 years was under asphalt immediately west of the library here at Hyde Park. The parking lot was moved to this site on the Morgan land a few years ago when this building was built. And within a year, we hope, the old garden will be producing vegetables and fruit for the benefit of all, and a great message through the National Park Service to the nation about the importance of productive gardens in our lives. And I've been the treasurer and I recently became the chairman of that organization. Is that what you meant, Barney?
I think that's really important. Rick's done a lot for this valley of ours, and this is the latest and not likely the last thing she'll be doing for the Hudson River Valley. Right? And now maybe it might be nice to hear from our perpetual den mother first, Sarah Olson, who for 16 years, maybe, has been at the head of this wonderful place as part of the National Park Service. You've been to the Park Service for
Well,
yes.
Thank you, Barney and Sarah. I just want to extend a quick welcome to you all. It's great to see everybody here. There's a lot going on here at the sites, much of which you may well be aware of. I just want to mention a couple things. Path Through History weekend's coming up, and for that event, actually at the Vanderbilt Mansion, we're going to open the coach house, the carriage room, for the weekend of that event. And if you haven't seen that building and that carriage room, it's well worth a trip. So watch for the specific hours on that. It's normally completely closed to people. And thanks to Wint and a new member of the Roosevelt Vanderbilt Conservancy, Kevin Burke, who are working very hard to help support the garden project. We're so excited to be bringing this garden back to life. And as Wint said, I think you'll see a lot more about that later this summer and through next year. This actual building the siting of this building has a great deal to do with the opportunity to bring the garden back. When I first got here, as Barney pointed out, many, many years ago, where this building would be placed was a great controversy. And through the efforts of a lot of people working together, it was actually moved from that garden location to this location, which is off the historic Roosevelt property. So it's all coming to fruition. We're very excited, and thanks to the Conservancy. So I look forward to the meeting.
With a grandmother like that, you can't fail. You really can. I would like to point out before Sarah introduces Eileen that not today, this was bad scheduling on Mark's part, usually pretty good. Tomorrow is St. Barnabas Day, so you just...
Well, it's now my pleasure to introduce Eileen Rohr, who is the supervisor for the town of Hyde Park. You've become somewhat of a fixture for our meetings, which is wonderful. We really appreciate the time that you take to keep us posted on all the great things happening here. So please, welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hyde Park on this beautiful Hudson Valley day. Of course, I'd like to express my thanks to Sarah and Barnabas and Mark for always inviting me to be part of these great meetings. So I'm just hoping when people drive through Hyde Park, they kind of experience the living Greenway. I've often mentioned how indebted Hyde Park is to Greenway, because I think we were the community that the founders must have had in mind, because we were a community that developed in the 1950s during the sprawl pattern, automobile-related development, and we really needed a lot of work, and yet we had these beautiful and fantastic historic sites with natural beauty. So it was because of Greenway's guidance and inspiration that we were able to adopt zoning codes that reflect the need for pedestrian amenities, for emphasis on our cultural and historical resources. So I just like to make note of a few of the achievements that we've obtained through the support of Greenway, whether it was through design influence or actual direct funding. So if you drive south, you'll see the redevelopment of the former Ames Plaza, and with the principles of green spaces and centers in green spaces, we were able to effectuate an improvement there that is reflective of the design standards that Greenway promotes. That happened in the last few years. We were also able to obtain a very successful grant application with the help of Bill Horton and DOT to create a main street on our Route 9 corridor. We're embarking on that project. It's worked very carefully, but we hope that by 2017, when you come here, you will see a newly redesigned space from the drive-in up to Park Plaza. That will be along the images of a complete street with bike lanes, green space on the outside of sidewalks, street trees. So we're really grateful and very excited about that. And it will build on the existing sidewalks that the National Park Service kindly put in through the drive-in, and making these connections that we all realize are what makes a community vital. We also, with the help of a Greenway grant, adopted Crossroad Core zoning. It's a new district in our historic area to promote appropriate redevelopment by prohibiting auto-related uses in a very small area and increasing density, requiring pedestrian amenities, and creating flexible standards. So again, we've used the Greenway model to use those standards for our new zoning and also the funding to hire a planner. We also, and I have some brochures in my bag, with the help of a Greenway grant, created a historic walking tour brochure and interactive website to bring a self-guided tour to the core of Hyde Park and our historic district. And it complements the zoning that we adopted. And this project was funded in part by a heritage development grant from the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area, and it was coordinated by our town historian. So again, we offer our thanks to Greenway for that assistance. So I think it's really very fair to say that Greenway was very prescient in their views and their designs, and thoughtful in promoting the redevelopment of places like Hyde Park, especially in light of the changes in our economy. I mean, who knew when you all started that IBM would be a fading industry and tourism would be what makes our local economy tick. So once again, thank you for inviting me and for your inspiration and leadership.
Thank you.
I guess we'll just, so we have a couple of more people to introduce. I'd like to ask Sakima Brown to come up to representing Senator Sue Serino. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you all for coming this morning, and again, thank you for welcoming me. I was surprised with my little name tag. Usually it just says Sue Serino, and I have to remind people who I am, but thank you. It says my name today. But again, the senator, with deep regrets, is not able to be here today because she is in Albany in session today, trying to get those last-minute bills through and helping our community before the June 17th deadline. Again, in her efforts to be everywhere at all times, she has a way of sending her staff members to various places. Even today, we're in about 4 different places at the same time. So again, we always welcome you. I have some business cards with me if you ever need to get in contact with her. She has an open door policy. Hyde Park is home. So anything that we could do to help you, anything we could do to help all of your different organizations, we would love to be able to do that as well. So again, please feel free to get my business card and to give me yours so that we can get on your mailing list, your distro list, and be able to be there in support of whatever projects that you have going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Erica Kane here representing Assemblyman Dee Dee Barrett, if you'd like to say some words.
Good morning. I'd just like to thank you for inviting me. I know that representatives from the Assembly Member's office have always attended these meetings if she's not available, and we're just very happy to be included in the process. The missions that Greenway looks at, all the preservation and the green space, and how we need to merge living and walkable and enjoyable communities for the best quality of life and the benefit of the economy all around are things that the Assembly Members feels very strongly about. I'm sure most of you know she's the head of a new subcommittee on tourism and economic development, and I know that a lot of, particularly this plan that Hyde Park just put together for their new walking tour, which is great. I checked out the website. All line up with the things, your mission and her mission seem to line up very well, and we're just very happy to be involved. Anything you need, any support you need, any advice, we're always here, and we're welcome to have some input or just be a voice to person to bounce some ideas off of if you need that.
So I guess if we don't have our wonderful speaker yet, Marcus Molinaro. Okay. All right, so we'll hold off and we'll move on from there while we wait. So at this point, we are moving on to presentations, and we have the great fortune of having Tim Wiedemann who is the co-chair of the Kingston Land Trust Rail Trail Committee, but also the head of a wonderful organization. It's his own company called Roundout Consulting. Just a fascinating, we're so lucky to have him. I just talked a little bit beforehand. He's actually from Western New York, but went to school at SUNY New Paltz, got his graduate degree in public policy, my major, yay, at Carnegie Mellon, in the Heinz College to get his master's, but came back to the Hudson Valley and apparently is here to stay. And his focus is on strategic planning, management consulting, to really help organizations and public entities better develop their management to achieve their missions. I'm sure you can say that better, but it sure sounded great to me. So with that, I will bring the floor over to
Thank you, Sarah. You actually said that better than I can, so that was great. Thank you for inviting me, Sarah and Barnabas and Mark and Jennifer, who is an active member of our work in Kingston. Really eager to be here and grateful for the opportunity to share the work we're doing in Kingston. I've got a presentation. It's going to be a little small in places up here, but visuals are always fun, so I'll walk through it. I think the work that I'm going to share is one small part of what of a bunch of things that are going on in Kingston. So there's a lot to say, but I'll stick to some basics about the trail work that we're doing. Let's see. Anybody see the full screen? Oh, there we go. So first, let me introduce myself a little bit more. I live in Kingston, have for about 12 years. I got involved with some rail trail work in the city of Kingston. I lived in an apartment that was about 500 feet from an abandoned railroad corridor. But I didn't know this for about 3 years while I lived there until a tragic accident claimed the life of somebody who fell into the railroad corridor. It was poorly managed, poorly signed, and it was a tragedy that is avoidable and something that I think called attention to the need to really maintain some of these old abandoned corridors more fully in the city of Kingston. After that, I had the fortune of finding out more about the railroad history in Kingston and learned that Kingston was once the hub for the county's railroad network. Originally, it was the intersection of the Hudson River and the Delaware and Hudson Canal, so an important transportation hub for water transportation, and then later an important hub for the railroads coming through Ulster County down from the Catskills, down along the western shore of the Hudson River to the Poughkeepsie Highland Bridge, which was an important link across the Hudson River. So I got involved with the Kingston Land Trust through that interest in the rail trails in the city of Kingston and the abandoned railroad corridors. A little bit about the Kingston Land Trust, founded in 2008. It's a different kind of land trust than a lot of land trusts in Ulster County and the surrounding region. It focuses on urban issues, in particular protecting important urban spaces, but importantly connecting those and activating those for public use. So, traditional land conservation model, we subscribe to it, feel it's important, but we know there are other players in our region that are really doing that kind of work, so our focus is a little different. We have a few key programs and initiatives that we've been working on in the last couple of years. The one that I'm going to share with you today is the Kingston Green Line. It's our rail trail initiative. We also have an urban agriculture initiative that involves a small-scale urban farm in Kingston and has supported some urban farm programming and education programming. And then we do some general open space protection. We have about 10 parcels in the city of Kingston, relatively small parcels since they're in an urban setting, totaling only about 12 acres. Recent successes are South Pine Street Farm, our small quarter-acre urban farm, is entering into its 4th growing season. They're open Monday, Wednesday, Friday on South Pine Street. They have a stand, and it's lovely, delicious stuff. Strawberries are in season right now, so if you're in Kingston, check it out. We've also, and I'll talk much more about this, developed strong public and private partnerships for the rail trail work that we see as important in Kingston. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We can't claim it all as our own. It's a partnership with a lot of entities, and I'll share those in a moment. We're also nearing the completion of the organization's first ever strategic plan, and that's where some of this kind of thinking about the Kingston Land Trust role in a community that has lots of other land trusts. We border up with the Wallkill Valley Land Trust and the Woodstock Land Conservancy and the Roundout of Sopus Land Conservancy. There's a lot of land trusts in the region, and our strategic planning process is helping us to define what makes the Kingston Land Trust a little different. So on to the Kingston Green Line, our rail trail project. A couple years ago, a group of us sat down, and Jennifer was at some of these meetings, and several other really committed members of the community in Kingston, looking at the assets of these abandoned railroad corridors in the city, and realized, after looking at a map, that Kingston was the traditional hub of the railroads, and as those railroads get converted to trails, it was becoming already the hub for the county's rail trail network. And so we came up with a vision for a project that became the Kingston Green Line, and that vision is up here. It was to create a network of linear parks, trails, and complete streets that connect residents and visitors to Kingston to the city's rich historic, cultural, recreational, and commercial resources. So we see this as kind of multi-tiered. There's an element to it that's serving the local population in Kingston, making it easier to get around Kingston. Those that are familiar with the sidewalks in Kingston know that they're beautiful historic bluestone, but that they're not always very walkable, strollerable, bicycleable, any of that kind of stuff. But it's also, as the hub for the county's rail trail network, important to consider visitors from outside of town that'll be navigating that eventually completed rail trail system through Kingston and need to find their way to the amenities that they want and through the city. So why build it? I get lazy sometimes on the benefits of this stuff because I think I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. You all understand, I think, the importance of parks and green spaces and trails. But you know, I think we have been making it our mission in Kingston to get out in front of groups that don't necessarily understand that and talk about these benefits. Clearly, these are not just places to go out and play. They create a lot of additional benefits through the economics of having a resource in the community that draws people from outside of town, generates economic activity through that tourism attraction, and creates jobs through that tourism attraction. We have a strong partnership in Ulster County with healthcare providers and public health initiatives in the county because there's a recognition that this is also a public health issue. And with Ulster County Executive Mike Hines' challenge to the community to create the healthiest county in New York State, Ulster County really needs to work on all fronts to try to improve public health and reduce obesity and chronic disease. It's also a mobility and social justice issue in Kingston. Kingston is divided by highways. Kingston has neighborhoods that are hard to get to in any other way than by car, and it has a high proportion, especially in Midtown, of residents with either one car or no car. And so we see it as a mobility and social justice issue. And generally, it's a quality of life issue. We have a strong partnership with the Ulster County Board of Realtors and with lots of real estate professionals in the region who recognize that people want these kinds of amenities in their communities. It creates a higher quality of life, makes a walkable community, and that importantly, that also kind of circles back to the economic argument that people are willing to pay a premium on properties that meet those demands. So our partnership has been expanding rapidly. So I mentioned that it's a public-private partnership. We can claim some credit for the initial vision of this Kingston Green Line trail system, but at this point, the Kingston Land Trust and the City of Kingston are in close partnership to implement this project. About a year and a half ago, the City of Kingston applied for several grants through the CFA process and was awarded over $4 million to begin construction and do final design of various aspects of the Kingston Green Line. So it was a major success. Some of the grants are from New York State DOT sources, some from NYSERDA, some from New York State Department of State and OPRHP. And we're working now with a larger and larger circle of supporters and partners to implement this project. I'll mention in particular that I handed out some postcards for our Ulster County Active Transportation Conference, and I'll talk about this again at the end. But this is coming up on Friday, and there's a number of people in the room here that are involved in it. And maybe if all the presenters and organizers and people who've been involved in planning this could just raise your hand. Don't be shy. I see some in the audience in the back too. So several of us have been working on this, and I found it to just be a fascinating opportunity to get to know more about organizations and to strengthen some of the partnerships that already have kind of been in the works for several years. But I would encourage you, if you're free on Friday, for any part of the day, to come out to the new Town of Rosendale Town Hall in Cottikill and join us for this conference. I think it's going to be an exciting meeting of the minds between groups working on trails, groups working on land preservation and land use issues and economic development issues, and groups working on complete streets projects throughout Ulster County and the region. So, I think it's safe to say, I feel a little shy saying it, but Kingston is experiencing a renaissance. There is really a lot of exciting stuff going on in the city of Kingston. Most visibly, maybe in Uptown Kingston. The last few years have seen a real resurgence and revitalization in Uptown Kingston. But I live in the Roundout, so I'm going to plug the Roundout. There's also an exciting renaissance going down by the waterfront. And I think we've contributed to some extent to that renaissance. Over the last year, we've had over 200 active volunteers working on our rail trail projects in Kingston. It's a combination of our rail trail committee, people coming out for work days, and people, as pictured here in the photograph, coming out for informative hikes along the future rail trail, learning about the history of Kingston. And then our management team that's working diligently day in, day out to see this all through. I mentioned that the city, in partnership with the Kingston Land Trust, received over $4 million in grant funding that'll go towards design and construction of the project. Those were awarded in 2014 for the Kingston Connectivity Project and largely overlaps with the Kingston Green Line. And then Ulster County as well has been critically involved in this. I'll share a little bit about how they connect in. They own a portion of the former UND Railroad that comes into Kingston, and so there's a rail trail project there that folds into the Green Line. There's several projects, and this becomes an alphabet soup really quickly, but Kingston Connectivity Project, the Building a Better Broadway Project, the Ulster County Rail Trail Project, and then our comprehensive Green Line management plan. These are all initiatives that we're working on right now and are seeing exciting progress with. So quickly, just for those that aren't familiar, I just have a couple maps here, and this is where we get to the visual part of this. I mentioned that Kingston was the hub for the railroad corridors. It becomes, as we work on these projects and as others in the surrounding area work on related projects, it becomes the hub for regional trails. And so you can see the Kingston Point Rail Trail is one of our own. It's just within the city of Kingston. Goes from Midtown Kingston down to the Rondout Creek, out the creek and up to the Hudson River, and eventually will connect up to a promenade that's planned on the former cement factory that's out along the Hudson River. It also connects to the Hudson River Greenway Water Trail down in the Rondout Creek, several boat launch areas and connections to the Greenway Water Trail. Connects to the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail is the next logical connection, and from there, as connections are made through Lloyd and into Highland to the Hudson Valley Rail Trail and the walkway over the Hudson. It connects to the O&W Rail Trail, which is also known by various other names, the Hurley Rail Trail, Martletown Rail Trail, D&H Heritage Canal Corridor, all that stuff. And it connects to the future Ulster County Rail Trail project, also known as the Catskill Mountain Rail Trail, up to the Ashokan Reservoir. Zooming in a little bit, this is a map of the city of Kingston indicating the 4 sections of the Green Line. We've got a Midtown hub in blue. In yellowish orange is our Rondout and Kingston Point section that goes to the Rondout Creek and out to the Hudson. The purple is the section that goes out through Uptown towards the Catskill Mountains and out the Rondout Valley to the O&W Rail Trail. And then the red, lots of spaghetti there to figure out the route that comes into Midtown eventually, but connects to the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail right now. If those of you that haven't been out there, Michael, I'm sure, can tell you about all the exciting work that's happened on the northern section of the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, which extends all the way to Rockwell Lane, just outside of Kingston now. So down in the Rondout, just a little bit about this project. This is really where we're putting most of our effort right now. There's a city-owned portion of the former Ulster and Delaware Railroad, so ownership isn't really an issue. That's a nice, easy kind of step that we can check off the checklist. And so we've started to design and even started to construct the trail down there. This all actually got started thanks to Greenway with a grant back in 2013 to do a feasibility study for the Kingston Point Rail Trail, and we hired Alta Planning and Design, and they came in and did an initial conceptual design, about a 20% design project that got the whole thing started. We then entered into a partnership with the city as they were awarded the CFA grants to begin to develop the trail from Midtown down to the waterfront. And we, once that the grant awards were made, we began the design process for a total of about 7.5 miles of trail connecting from Cornell Street in Midtown Kingston through the street grid to East Chester Street near the Rondout Savings Bank on Broadway in Kingston, and then from there an off-street rail to trail conversion across 9W, snaking down to the Rondout Creek. And then again, on-street connections along the Rondout Creek out to a trolley footpath along the trolley tracks out to the causeway to Kingston Point, and some on-street infrastructure up to the Hudson River into the AVR cement factory property. We began site preparation on this corridor, especially the rail to trail conversion, back in the fall, and the Saratoga Associates was awarded a contract along with a team of others, and in the last couple months has begun work on the detailed design and construction documents that will be prepared for this. The hope is to begin construction in early 2016. There's some images from our conceptual design showing what some of this might look like when it's done. We've got some pocket parks and some signature elements to the trail, like the tunnel on the left, Hasbrook Tunnel, that goes under a crazy intersection just off of 9W in Kingston. And then a footpath out along the causeway, the former Ulster and Delaware Railroad. This is where the dayliners would dock from New York City, and then passengers would get off, get on the train, and head up towards the Catskills. Next to the trolley tracks there, a footpath along that. In Midtown, there's also a lot of exciting work happening. There was a project that started last year with Ulster County Transportation Council to redesign the Broadway corridor called Building a Better Broadway. That is continuing now under the City of Kingston, which was awarded funding through the Transportation Enhancements Program through DOT. And the city, I think, is contracting with GPI to continue that work. It'll include bike ped improvements and signalization improvements along the corridor. Saratoga Associates, as I mentioned, is working on the design all the way to Cornell Street off of the Broadway corridor. And there's some public input sessions that'll begin this spring on that project. There's a kind of tight timeline on this, so we'll start to see some construction as early as, late 2016. It has to go out to bid for construction. So there's some snapshots from the design, the conceptual design stuff. The important thing I'll point out is that the design as it stands right now, which is yet to be finalized, calls for a two-way separated bicycle track along Broadway. So those that are familiar with Broadway know that that's a massive change. That's a real kind of game changer on Broadway in Kingston. And we've pushed really hard for that. You can see the kind of center cross section there, Broadway East. That's from our Alta design way back about 2.5 years ago, and we pushed really hard to keep that in the designs as VHB has completed them for the Ulster County Transportation Council and as GPI is picking them up for the city. So we hope to see that hopefully begin construction in late 2016. So there's a lot going on. I summarized it as best I could in a short window here, but I put a couple ways that you can keep up to date with these efforts up here on the slide. So we're eager to connect with groups and share the work that we're doing, learn from those groups and figure out ways that our work intersects together. We also recognize that there's ways to refine these messages, and we appreciate that there are groups out there that are not as supportive and not as informed as Greenway is about these issues, and that we need to reach out to those groups. So your input on that is welcome. KingstonGreenLine.org is the website where you can get a lot of the stuff that I showed. And then I mentioned our conference this Friday, ActiveTransportationUlster.org is where you can register for that or find out more if you're interested. And my email address is up there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is just fascinating. I, for one, did not know very much about it, so it's a wonderful thing for us all. We do have some time for questions, if anybody has some. Wind.
Tim, is there a presumption that light rail and trolley service will never come back in Kingston and use these lines, or is that a possible change in the future if it's necessary?
There's several different situations related to rail. So I mentioned the trolley down on the Rondout Creek. Trolley Museum of New York has a facility leased on the city property there, and they continue to operate their trolley along the Rondout Creek. They're looking to expand that. We support that. The city has worked with them in the last couple of years to do $800,000 worth of improvements to the track down there. So there's clearly a role for trolley down there. Historically, the trolleys actually came up Broadway. They didn't use this U&D corridor. That was for the passenger rail and freight service. So down the Rondout, I think we can sense where the appropriate place is for trolley and try to expand that. There is some hope eventually that maybe that trolley line would extend into the AVR, Hudson Landing, former cement factory property along the Hudson to provide a link down to the commercial district in Broadway. We'll see as that project is kind of still, mired in lots of, challenges as it gets further along in development. Then there's the separate question in Uptown Kingston. The Catskill Mountain Railroad is a scenic tourist train in Uptown Kingston, and I could go on for hours about this. This is one that is a hot button issue, as you are aware if you've seen any of the coverage in the paper. I think the important thing to point out is that it has not been an active freight or passenger service for over 30 years. And I think it's fairly obvious that that's because there isn't a market for either right now on that corridor. And that there's a compelling argument that I think is made more compelling by recent successes of the tourist train to preserve some element of tourist train along the corridor. We understand that. I think everyone really understands that, and the devil's in the details about where it is and how long it is and all that kind of stuff.
Ken?
Yes, Kitty.
Where does the ultimate funding for maintenance come?
I brushed over that very quickly, but that's a big part of what we're looking at. We have a grant to look at management for the long term for this trail system. And we're working on a comprehensive management plan. We have pieces of a management plan. This has been something that right from the get-go, when we came to the city back in 2012 talking about this, they said, whoa, 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 whoa. We want to see a management plan because our DPW, we just cut 18 staff from DPW and there's no way we're going to take care of this. So, I think we stepped back and we started to think about those issues. And right now, I think the Kingston Land Trust sees that as its role. We are marshaling our resources and our volunteers and connecting with other groups in the city of Kingston to prepare to take on management of this as it gets built. That's, is there anybody here from the city of Kingston? No. So I can say that to us is a temporary solution. We see it's city property. Our vision is for the Kingston Land Trust to take an easement or some sort of relatively long-term management agreement on the property, but it remains city property. And so there's an element to this that we think is a challenge, but something we need to work on, which is to build capacity within the city and the recognition within the city that this is an asset that's good for the city and that over the long term they need to maintain it. And Michael, I'm sure, knows this from the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail Association. This is a perpetual challenge of these trails. We have nonprofit groups in many communities that maintain them, and in many cases, they're municipally owned. And so the relationship between that nonprofit entity and the municipality is tricky, but I think it's something worth exploring and figuring out the long-term solution. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, good. Yeah, Jeff.
Hi, thanks. I'm Jeff Anzavino from Scenic Hudson, and Scenic Hudson is one of the main aspects of our mission is connecting people from cities to nature, and we just can't thank the Kingston Land Trust enough for the work that you're doing in Kingston. I know that you're sort of modest, many partners are involved, but you guys are really the glue that's keeping this all together. And described this very well. I think it's a terrific project. From a personal perspective, I bought a small, very modest house across the street from the Hudson Valley Rail Trail. That's allowed me to ride my bike to work 80% of the time, year-round. I have no doubt that this is going to do even more benefit in the city of Kingston, Ulster's county seat, where thousands of people live, and they're going to be using it by the hundreds and by the thousands on a daily basis. So congratulations for your good work, and I'm very proud to live in Ulster County to be part of all the great things going on here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks for your support. Jennifer, and then maybe Glenn.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something you said in the presentation, besides the gratitude we feel for the Greenway and the grant. I don't even remember, maybe $10,000 that launched this entire thing. If you all remember that very hot day at the Maritime Museum, and they came to present the first time. And several of you were there. But that all happened since then. And what these grants that we give out represent is leveraging a small group like this to really be able to get on their way. So even Glenn to testify to that Hudson Valley Rail Trail, because he worked on the very early, right Glenn? He worked on the very early part, also with the Greenway grant that leveraged more millions. So I think this is an important point about what we're doing here, even if our grants are small.
I just wanted to reinforce Jeff's accusation of you being modest. Going back to the question about long-term maintenance, I know one of the things you and your consultants are looking at are sustainable, low-maintenance design elements. So that's one aspect of this in terms of stormwater and how long, the different elements are going to last. So
Yeah.
we raise our glass to you.
Yeah, well, and Tom Baird from Bartonville Judas is going to be one of our presenters on Friday talking about trail design solutions for environmental sustainability. We see that as a critical issue here, that, you know, we've got plenty of examples in Kingston of trails that weren't built well for the environmental conditions that they're in, and it creates a management nightmare. So that's another part of this management question, making sure that we build it right when we build it the first time so that managing it is easier down the road. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Before I introduce our distinguished county executive, I'd like to welcome Abel Garrigan back to the forum and say, welcome back, always forgiven, Abel. He's a distinguished resident of Kingston, and your father was the mayor, right?
A long time ago.
Yeah, well, we're still here, Abel. Yes. But now it's my pleasure to introduce once again, if Sarah Olson is our den mother, our perpetual den mother, Mark,
I was mistaken, he's not here.
he's not here. And I won't introduce him. I thought he would step in on the side there. But Mark Molinaro will probably show up. And he, if he doesn't, I'll just say, and on his behalf, that he saved the Greenway not once, but twice.
Absolutely.
And it's, so there's almost anything, almost anything you'll do. But now we'll go and right into now let's see. Yeah, we go to the Greenway.
We can. I mean, we usually do the formality of the agenda review, and so hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the agenda, and just if anybody would like to add anything, or are we all set on the? Looks like we're all set. We then need to approve the minutes from the last board meeting as well. We'll join this together, as well as to approve the minutes of the grant committee meeting of June 4th. So, okay, seconded?
I just, to discuss the March minutes.
Yes.
Are these personnel changes? I missed the March meeting, and I confess I haven't read the March minutes. So are the proposed personnel changes discussed in the March minutes? If not, I think we should reserve 5 minutes to I just think it's important for the record that there be a board discussion of those changes. So if that did not occur in March, let's just make sure we do it today.
That is a good idea.
Okay.
It certainly is on the agenda, but let's make sure that we brief the board on the proposed changes. Did you want to talk about it now, or when?
You want to talk about that?
No, when it's on the agenda, but if it was covered in the March minutes, then I didn't think we had to go through it again. That's all I'm saying.
That's good. No, very important. So we have a motion. Kevin, you seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so those two motions are carried. And now we will move on to the council. Barney.
Thank you, Sarah. Now we'll get right into I'm calling the Greenway Community Council's meeting to order. And the first order of business is that pesky Greenway compact liability matter.
Sure. Well, I'm pleased to report that the update is that there is no update. As you may know, that the Greenway is party to a case of one of our communities about the Greenway indemnity. The indemnity we thought meant that if you get sued for implementing the Greenway compacts, you will be protected by the Attorney General. The Attorney General disagreed, so the town, through Flesh and Rhinebeck, wants the court to decide what the law means. The case is on appeal, and the second department has not scheduled the oral arguments as of this date.
And it goes on. This was Steve Salan's wonderful addition to the Greenway, and what it does, it means it's really important to particularly small towns, not so much to Poughkeepsie or some of the richer and powerful centers in the Hudson River Valley, but small towns can be pressured by developers, and this provides an outlet, and it's more. We've had how many lawsuits? 3, I guess, in total.
We've had 2.
And
One was successful in the Rhinebeck case, kind of threw a wrench in the works.
And so it's important, and Mark is watching it, and now I will also turn to Mark. Oh, no, wait, I said we have 2 new board members. I don't know whether either one.
Vincent's on the phone, and Megan's over here to my
Okay,
right.
all right, well, there you go. The Rockland County, every county has a seat, and that's Rockland County. And Megan is appointed by Mark
Howard Zemsky, the chairman of the Parks and Development.
So, welcome when you get here.
Well, Megan's here.
Megan,
And I've asked Megan to give an update on the upcoming consolidated funding application process.
I'll be here at Barn.
Okay, I Megan. Okay. You want to say something?
So do you want me to
Yes.
say real quick? Okay.
Yeah, anything.
So thank you, everybody, for coming this morning. Just wanted to give you a really quick update. As many of you know, the CFA process, round 5, has opened. The application opened to the public on May 1st, and the submission deadline is 4 p.m. on July 31st. We have a very exciting year before us. We, as the Mid-Hudson, are one of the 7 regions eligible to compete for the $1.5 billion of bank settlement funds that are going to be awarded in 3 $500 million awards. So the Mid-Hudson is competing with 6 other regions throughout the state. The 3 regions that are ineligible to compete are Western New York City, and Long Island. So we are competing with the other 6 in the state. So it's a very exciting year. Just to give you an idea of the amount of money that's on the table this year, last year the Mid-Hudson was the top performer in the entire state, and we brought in $82.8 million into the region. This year, the lowest awardee, or the lowest awards that a region would bring in, is around $90 million. So the swing of money this year, you're going to see anywhere from $90 million up to $130 million per region, depending on which competitions you win. So any of you that have been following the regional council, I can tell you we are underway. We are working tirelessly. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The progress reports are due up to the state on September 21st, and our upstate revitalization plan is due to the state on October 5th. You will all know Mark has been a very active member as well. He's been absolutely fantastic assisting the council and making sure that we're aware of all the great things that are happening here, and you will continue to receive updates. We have various CFA workshops and informational sessions set up. We've had a few in the past. We have another one tonight down at Westchester Community College, and then another on June 23rd at Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh. But if you do have any questions, I don't want to take up a lot of time because we could talk for hours about this, and there's a lot of detail, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, and my office is here and ready to help. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, Megan.
No problem.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. All right, now Mark.
Sure. Just want to give a budget update to the council. The budget was passed in early April. Our budget numbers remain the same from 2014. So it's $185,000 in operations and $136,000 in grants. And that was in the adopted budget. We also have grants.
Now you go right into the grants. We have 5 grants. All but one is on the east side of the river.
We don't play favorites. Just how it worked out.
We have 5, so, would you describe and ask for this discussion, or we'll have a single motion at the end of the 5 grants, starting with Albany County.
Okay. The Grants Committee reviewed these applications at its June 4th telephone meeting and has recommended the grant awards on the agenda today. The first one is for Albany County for the Lawson Lake Barn Rehabilitation Project. It's a public county park. It serves as a regional asset for people. They use it for recreation, they use it for community activities, and they're seeing the restoration of the barn as a critical step to make the venue more usable for the public and the community at large in that part of Albany County.
So here to say a few words about the project is Scott Siegel from Albany County, from the County Executive's Office. Scott, you want to say a few words?
Sure. I'd like to thank the board for inviting us to this. Thank you very much. So Lawson Lake, Mark, you described it pretty well. The county has owned Lawson Lake Park since about the mid-70s. It's gone mostly unattended over the years by prior administrations and just a lack of fund and interest in it. Our current administration in Albany County is working on bringing it back to life, along with a number of other initiatives we have. We have our own rail trail project that we're working on right now as well. Lawson Lake Park used to be used by multiple community groups, boys and girls clubs, 4-H clubs, all different types of youth organizations. And we want to bring it back to that. There's a need in there. We have an initiative to bring our inner city children, our youth from the city of Albany out to Queens, out to the rural community and host different events, bring the summer camps back, rehab a lot of the buildings that are up there so that eventually it will be able to be used again as an overnight camp. There's lodges up there, multiple facilities. There's a gorgeous lake that we are also in the process of doing improvements on quality and exploring some options with DEC. There we have kayaking, fishing. It's just the sky's the limit out there, and we're hoping to exceed that limit. At the moment, the barn needs a lot of work. It's still usable. We can use it for storage. We've had some interest from Cornell Cooperative Extension. They want to do some programs out there, and they've expressed interest in using the barn. It needs about $12,000 or so worth of work to make it usable and bring it back up to code. And that's what we're going to do. And the nice thing is this is a shovel-ready project. We're going to get this underway as soon as humanly possible. So we'll see results very, very shortly with this. And on behalf of Albany County, on behalf of the county executive, I want to thank the Greenway so much for taking this project into consideration. And thank you. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Scott, and congratulations. That grant's for $5,000. The next grant on the list is to the Village of Hoosick Falls in Rensselaer County. This is for Hoosick Falls Zoning Code Update Phase 2. The Greenway Board previously funded the Phase 1 update. This round, the Grants Committee recommended, in addition to this grant award, that the Greenway staff provide them with guidance to encourage them strongly to adopt a policy document that could underpin the zoning. At this point, they're updating zoning to address a particular issue in the village development, but the Greenway Grants Committee really wants to encourage the village to adopt a comprehensive plan moving forward to shape development. Linda, do you want to say a few words about it?
Yeah, I've been working with the village for a little while, and they've been working on wanting to tweak their zoning, and they have a lot of areas of very old Victorian, beautiful houses, and it's all zoned single family. And this has been there's been a lot of changes, some single, two-family or multi-family, and this has been allowed them to look at each property and figure out how many units are actually in each property, so that when they change the zoning, they can tweak it into, what can work, and also when if there's areas of issues, because there's too many units, and sometimes they have like 4 units and they have no parking. They are, they're going to look at too many issues for me, so this is very, very important.
Good. Thank you for that background. Appreciate it. That grant's for $5,000. The next grant is to the town of Sound Lake, again in Rensselaer County. This is for a project involving the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance. We've been a funder and supporter of the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance since it was founded. It's a consortium of communities in eastern Rensselaer County looking to conserve and protect the natural resources and also to encourage regional planning and trail development in that part of Rensselaer County. I know the Estuary Program has also been a partner and funder for the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance. This project will seek to brand and create a uniform identity for that part of Rensselaer County to instill in people that live there that the place is special and they should all be stewards of the place. I think this project not only is going to help accomplish that, but also help knit together more effectively those communities in what is a very strong and staunch home rule part of Rensselaer County into thinking more regionally. This grant is for $5,000. The next one is a really great project in the town of Somers. This ties into the presentation you just saw before. This is a project to implement complete streets in Somers, which is an inner-rig suburb in Westchester County. What is innovative about this project is that it takes the somewhat segregated street plan of the suburbs with its cul-de-sacs and curvilinear streets and seeks to connect destinations, school to where people live, to shopping, to different amenities within that village in Westchester County. I'm not sure if anybody's here from the town of Somers. Oh, great. You want to say a few words about the project?
Sure. First, I just want to plug the town of Somers. We are the cradle of the American circus, by the way. Yeah, Barnum and Bailey. Bailey actually was a farmer in the town of Somers, and the way he found a way to make money was he basically had camels and elephants plowing his land, and he saw that people actually would pay more just to see them. So that's how the circus started. In any case, thank you again for the grant. You put it rightly. We're basically trying to develop sidewalks first, then trails, as well as bikeways. Our schools right now are almost linearly aligned along a major route. And then in addition to that, it then goes on to the high school. And if you just simply went on the left side of the road, you'd basically go by all of our schools. The problem is there's no sidewalks. And so therefore we have a safety issue. Kids can't walk to school because we don't have sidewalks. So we have parents bringing them, we have buses, we have an enormous amount of traffic every morning just to unload the kids at school. So that's the first part of that. The second part of that is we have a very large park that is called Reese Park, and that's at the end of the line of those schools. And that, again, doesn't have any sidewalks. So the kids can't go from the school to the park. And above all, our commercial center is right opposite the Elephant Hotel. The Elephant Hotel, obviously, is our town hall. And it is, as I said, opposite the commercial area. That commercial area has no sidewalks to get to it. So this is all about access. And again, thank you very much for the grant.
Thank you. That grant's for $10,000. The final grant in the series is to the village of Tarrytown in Westchester County. It's for a Tarrytown station and waterfront transit-oriented development. This project, I think, capitalizes on the unique opportunity that a lot of riverfront communities in the lower part of the Hudson Valley have, and that is that they're on the rail line, they're also on the waterfront. This is looking to outline a new zoning code that's going to shape development and incentivize growth around that transit hub in and around the train station area. Michael Blau here is the village administrator for Tarrytown, is here. You want to say a few words about it, Michael?
First off, I'd like to thank everybody for the grant. We're actually very excited. We've started a strategic plan for the area. It's our riverfront, it's our parks, and it includes a tremendous number
of parking lots on our riverfront, which we're not necessarily enthralled with, but obviously people need to get to Manhattan. We're a 35-minute express train ride to Manhattan. But we've now expanded this. We have the train station. We have a lot of areas around the train station, which essentially when we zoned back in the early 50s, we looked at what was there and said, fine, there's commercial there, we're going to zone it commercial. There's industrial there, we're going to zone it industrial. Now we have an opportunity to seriously look at what do we really want to have happen in that area. We've got commercial areas, we've got industrial areas, we've got parking lots and park areas, and we've invested over $10 million with grants from many of the people in this room to improve our parks. So we want to take a good hard look at this area and say, what do we really want to do? Do we want to have multi-purpose uses in the commercial, in the industrial? We've got parking lots. Do we want to convert those parking lots into garages with residential, with commercial? Now's our opportunity to say, what do we really want in these areas as opposed to zoning for what was there previously? So with your assistance, will allow us to move this project forward. So thank you very much.
It's a great project, Michael. This grant is for $15,000. The Village of Tarrytown is a Greenway compact community, therefore they're eligible for more than our normal cap of $10,000. That's all I have for the grants, Chairman.
Yes, indeed, and that's $40,000. Various, there's 35,000 is on the East Bank, but there's 5,000 for the West Bank. Well, Westchester gets more than half, and they're doing something right down there. And so now I would ask that we have a single motion. Second? Second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you very much. Now, Sarah, it's all yours.
All right, so we will now move on to the Greenway Conservancy portion of the meeting. I will call it to order. And this is where we will discuss a few administrative proposals that have come to our attention. There's been already some discussion internally, but I think that it is to your point, Kitty, that the entire board should hear what these proposals are. So, Mark, if you would, let us.
Conservancy employees, or I should say the Conservancy Board adopted a policy for personnel policy for Conservancy employees a while back to equate it to that of management confidential employees, state employees. These additions would amend that to include other specific additions to that policy. So the first addition to the policy is approving a change in maternity and paternity leave for Conservancy employees to extend the leave that's granted by federal requirement, and that's also extended in the MC regulations from 6 months to 1 year. And
This is unpaid.
this is unpaid. So that just means we'll hold their job for 1 year. We do have Beth, who remains on maternity leave, and while we anticipate that she's coming back shortly, the situation may change, but we want to make sure that we are keeping her job. She's given 10 years to the Greenway, and we can give her 1 year back. The second one is a change to provide health insurance to interns that have worked for the Greenway for more than 6 months. We have many interns who are graduate students from the planning program at UAlbany. Many of them are over the age of 26 years old, beyond the point at which they can still remain on their parents' insurance policy. We have discretion under the new healthcare law as an organization that has less than 50 employees to offer health insurance or not. I feel strongly that offering health insurance to our employees is a decent benefit to provide if you work for us more than 6 months and you are a full-time employee. Any other questions, comments?
I have some comments. I don't think I need that. So my understanding is that I thought federal maternity and paternity leave was 12 weeks. So this is news to me that it's 6 months now.
Federal is 12 weeks.
Pardon?
Federal is 12 weeks.
Okay. So I think that what we need to do is to just, first of all, I do think we need the word unpaid in the resolution. And I think that we need to have some language that says in recognition of the extraordinary contribution of our Greenway staff that requires so much extra time, commitment, energy, education, expertise. This is our way of expressing our gratitude and recognition. Because I think that there aren't many things that this board can really do to express that to our staff. And so I think I would like the language to just reflect that. So that would only be for the maternity one. I don't think there's anything that we need to amend in the healthcare for the adults.
Okay, I would, yes.
I was curious, do we have 100% health insurance?
Can you describe our relationship?
We're in the New York State Health Insurance Program, and its approximate rates are for individuals, I believe it's 75% would cover, and less than that for
Okay. So we will add the recognition about Greenway staff services in the resolution to adopt the change in maternity and paternity leave. And also that resolution does say the word unpaid maternity and paternity leave in the third whereas.
Well, it's in the third whereas, but in the resolution itself, I think we should put that word.
Therefore, be resolved.
Up to 1 year's unpaid maternity.
Okay,
Right?
good edit, thank you.
Can I make a comment? While we certainly do appreciate and recognize the hard work, I believe maternity and paternity leave is not a reward. I believe it's a right. So I don't think we're rewarding people. I think it's a basic right they should have. It's just a different way of looking at it.
I appreciate that perspective, Jane.
Well, I mean, if it was a right, we wouldn't be talking about it because it'd already be justified under the law, but it's not. We're going above and beyond. So I think it's something we're granting, so it's not just a right. It's Vince from Rockland on the phone.
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.
Well, with that said.
Having said that, I support, voting for it, but that's how I would characterize it.
Would we change the resolution in any way to reflect?
Is there consensus about the additional language that Kitty's proposed, just to say something about, perhaps not in recognition of the Greenway staff, but the Greenway board feels that staff deserves?
Well, I feel strongly that in recognition of the extraordinary contributions, dedication, expertise that our staff brings to this. We just don't have many ways in which we can express that appreciation. So,
3 months is a legal right. I think beyond 3 months could be recognition.
right. That's why we're changing it, right? Because
I
guess the question is just in terms of its precedential value. If you have employees down the road who aren't stellar, who shouldn't be recognized, do we still want there to be your policy, or is this a one-off or customized solution for one employee? And I think we want something that's generalizable. I think when you say recognition, it does make it seem like it's tied to performance, which I don't know if that's what you're intending. So I think you should clarify if that's what you're intending.
I think we can make the statement general enough to say that we're providing a benefit above and beyond the legal requirement because we recognize the value of the staff. Does that accomplish both?
Yeah. Other than general enough.
So we're adding whereas the Greenway board feels providing this benefit would be adequate recognition for the Greenway staff above and beyond.
And I have, what I have is in recognition of the extraordinary contributions, dedication, and expertise of staff in difficult circumstances. I believe that's what
I think I'll take out difficult.
Yes, I don't. Yes, I guess the issue is if some people are not working extraordinarily, is that just, is that language a little too effusive?
But every organization faces that. I mean, that's,
May at its discretion.
Can we offer it as?
It's a new policy for every employee at Greenway.
It's a new policy for everyone.
Yeah.
Even if they're subpar.
It would be non-discretionary.
Yeah.
So you can't have a personnel policy like that. It's discretionary. Raises you can do that, but benefits like that you can't.
I think we shouldn't lose track of the fact that these sorts of facts, once they're accomplished, add to the incentive of hiring. I mean, they will look at this and I've got some choices. This Greenway job looks pretty good, but it looks even better because of the health insurance and maternity leave and so forth. So I think we are reasonably being selfish to do this, not just saying thank you to people. It's making it easier for you to find with people and bring them on board.
Good point.
So do we have consensus around Scott's language? I think it's relatively benign in the context of one resolution. It does set a permanent policy moving forward for all of our employees, that's its intent.
Okay, so with that, that modification in place, can I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll move it.
All right, and I guess we're talking about both at this point, can we do
Yeah.
that? So,
No,
all right, so
Conservancy
Kitty,
Board.
sorry?
No, both resolutions.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
The health
The
insurance.
intern and this, so you'll,
Yeah, I move that we adopt a resolution regarding amending our maternity, paternity leave policy and the ability of interns who have worked at least 6 months for the Conservancy to be eligible for health insurance.
okay, and Stefan, did you want a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, so then there is, Mark, there's an authorizing the acting state executive director to apply for grants.
Yes, we do this every year during CFA season, just to express the board's support for grant applications that I may submit through any grant opportunity that's available. I'd like to come back to this particular issue at least once a year to make sure the board still supports that position, and this resolution will accomplish that.
Go get them all.
Big money, big money.
All right, so does it need approval? All right, so again, all right, Stefan, you'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Kevin, all right,
I think Jane wanted to say.
all right, Kevin, sorry. So all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. So then we move on to the Conservancy Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area budget adoption. And I think the detailed budget is in the packet. Hopefully people have had a chance to review it. It has been reviewed by the Finance Committee, and we are going to recommend that it be approved. But I think I'd like to have Mark talk about it just very generally, and of course, if there are any questions.
All right, I promise this won't be painful. I know how painful budgets can be. A few years ago, the board decided to combine or meld the budgets for our state funding for the Conservancy and our federal funding that we received for the National Heritage Area. Both funding streams are tracked now on the state-federal fiscal year. We adopt the budget at this time because it's after the state budget is adopted and after we receive our federal funding, so we know how much money we're going to have in the bank. We take that and we budget it out. You can see the revenues for the Greenway are in green. Revenues for the National Heritage Area are in blue. Just a couple of highlights. We have the regular state appropriation, which remained the same for the Conservancy, $166,000. We also host a number of grants on behalf of the Hudson River National Estuarine Research Reserve. You see that in the bottom section of the first page. We receive 10% of those funds for administration fees, which helps to fund staff. Our National Heritage Area appropriation for this year and our funding authorization was extended through 2021 with an act of Congress this past December. And so our allocation this year is $491,000 for our federal programs. You can see a number of the expenses, mainly personnel and regular operations for the Conservancy. Similarly, you'll see personnel and operations for the National Heritage Area and various other program expenses. You'll notice that in our budgeting process, we like to articulate the full amount that we have available in our proposed budget rather than the amount we anticipate to spend in a particular category. So the board can see very clearly and openly that we're tracking the amounts of funds that we have in our program categories each year, that we're not sort of hiding money that we have available from you all in those categories. Any questions about the budget? Anything to add, Scott, as the budget master?
No, you got it.
Okay.
Just one question. Health and retirement, are those in the personal services?
Yes.
And all that's in there. So have you anticipated any potential increase?
There are a couple, what we've been doing for the past few years is creating a budget line for the position that we've received approval to hire. Also, there are a couple additional raises, which we have factored into the budget amount this year for Greenway Conservancy and Council employees. I think it's 2% for state employees.
As of April 1st, payable next time.
And the personnel expenses also are inclusive of the anticipated additional healthcare costs for employees.
Great, thank you.
So if there are no other questions, then I will call for a motion to approve this budget. Jane? Jennifer seconding. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that motion is carried. We then move on to the Conservancy Trail Grant Program. Now, this was announced. Is this new news? The fact that we have received the 100,000?
It's new to a public meeting.
Okay. Well, it is very exciting that we have received 100,000, and I think Mark, if you want to describe what the plan is to work with them.
We're very grateful to our friends in the Assembly and the Senate this year for allocating in the state budget $100,000 for this grant program through the Environmental Protection Fund. It's the first time we've received money for that fund for this program. It was very critical because we were out of money for the program. And I think we were able to make the case with help from many of our members who saw their representatives in Albany that this program is important and should continue. So we're very grateful for that support. This year, the grant committee has decided to allocate $60,000 of that $100,000 because we know that this funding source is a permanent year-to-year funding source. We have a draft grant application available, and we'll be circulating that around to the management committee. The management committee has also recommended that we not make too many changes this year to the grant application, but perhaps come back to that once we complete the gap analysis for the Greenway Trail to reprioritize funding allocation. We saw a great example of how these small grants impact communities in Kingston, and that spread effect is tangible throughout the Hudson River Valley. So we know that they're important. We just really thank folks in the legislature for getting us the money.
It is very, very exciting. And Mark, do we know when the applications might be announced?
I hope to announce them within 2 weeks. They will be due on September 11th.
Okay, great. So mark your calendars. It's back in business or continuing in business. So that will have some wonderful impacts, we hope. So now, yes, we have an update on the Water Trail Guidebook.
Well, I'm going to update you on the entire Water Trail program because you gave me the mic, Sarah. The Water Trail website that we've been working on for the last few months, we're hoping to be able to do a soft launch at the end of this month. The Water Trail map series that we're working on, we have gotten input from Friends staff and from WINT, and we now have, for the backside, about 8 to 10 categories to fit into this little white space. And we've got room for 3 or 4, so Mark and I are going to try to trim that down next week and then begin that process. Once we have those texts finalized, we can get these maps up and running. The third piece of our branding initiative is with our private sector partner, the Hudson River Water Trail Association. And we've been working with them for the last several months to update the Water Trail Guide, and I got the proof copy yesterday. This is what it's going to look like. It's different from the big green book that we used to have, in that when you lay it out on your picnic table to plan your trip, the book stays open. It fits inside the hatch on a kayak, and it will fit in a dry bag. And this is what it will look like once it's done. And this is what the charts will look like. This is the section from Haverstraw to Irvington. And each of these little black dots that you probably can't see very far are one of the sites. There's 12 on this page alone. So we're making progress. If anyone wants to take a closer look at this, see me after the meeting.
How much will it cost?
I believe they're going to charge $35 for it. And a little bit more with membership. No, I'm sorry, 35 with membership in the Water Trail Association.
So now may I have your permission to say a word?
Absolutely.
This is extraordinary, and it, don't you move. Scott Miller is the guy who got this started. And if you really want to see a picture of him, on the back in here, the fourth kayak back. This is a program that has been in existence for
1994 is when they came to us.
It was a last-minute Pataki.
It was actually brought to us by the Water Trail Association, but Governor Pataki is the one who put money behind it.
And so this is Our Hudson, and you have how many water sites are there now?
Including the Canal Corporation site between Whitehall and Lower Manhattan, we have 115 sites.
And he got a grant from the state of,
It was $1 million, it wound up being $718,000.
one of the few times that he didn't spend it all. But it's extraordinary achievement for the Hudson River Valley. No other place has been able to do anything like this. And I think if you don't mind, a little hand for Scott for doing it.
Well deserved, Scott. So I think the last item on our agenda is a discussion about the gap analysis.
Sure. I've had meetings with lots of stakeholders and people get their input on what this gap analysis would be. It's been on the agenda for almost a year. I'm still in the process of writing the RFP, and that should be out shortly. It's going to include both the mapping portion, stakeholder engagement portion, and a marketing portion to make sure that we're producing materials that are going to engage both public and private funders. The idea again here is to map a route that will finally take people from New York City to the Capital District, both on and off what we call the Greenway Trail.
Both sides of the river? Or?
That remains to be seen, but that's where we're starting from.
All right, well, we'll be eagerly awaiting the final RFP. So good work. We will now move over to the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area. Barney, if you want to carry that on.
Okay, stay there, Sarah. We'll do this together. Yeah. And now we're calling into order Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area, which is coterminous with the Greenway, except that the heritage area starts at the Westchester border. That was Mr. Inchy, and actually he did both of them. Now the first one, okay, we're calling to begin the order. The first thing is the Knox Cannon Trail. This is something, if Jim Johnson were here, he'd say that this, one of the most extraordinary things that happened in the American Revolution was this overweight, he was almost 300 pounds, of a bookseller from Boston who had no experience in artillery, and he was a patron saint of artillery in the United States, bringing from, which lake was that damn thing? Champlain, some cannon that the French had left there when the British took over, because we had no cannon. He brought them in the winter, actually the winter before the revolution started, brought these cannons down close to, a little north of here, and then over into Boston. And that is when that convinced the British to come to New York.
I don't think one of them was ever fired. They were on Dorchester Heights, and the Brits evacuated Boston.
And that was it. And then they said, if that hadn't happened, as Jim Johnson would say, we'd be speaking English, right? But it was an extraordinary event that hardly anyone knows or celebrates. And Jim Johnson, who was a member of the council, and who is retired as the head of the military history department at West Point. He was, of course, a graduate of West Point. And so he is, and he would say that this is a marvelous thing that the Greenway is doing. And it is, if we get the damn thing finished. Mark, how much more do we need to do?
Well, in 2008, we secured a DOT grant to do conservation. There are about 30 markers that mark the route that Knox took from Fort Ticonderoga out to the border with Massachusetts, and then there were another 30 that marked the route through Massachusetts to Dorchester Heights. We conserved all the markers in New York State in 2008, working with the National Park Service. And Jim Johnson's goal here is to interpret the trail. The markers that were installed in the mid-20s don't do a really good job of telling the entire story, and the interpretive signs are going to accomplish that. We've already engaged in a partnership with the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership, who has agreed to design and fabricate 2 interpretive signs that will be installed up in their neck of the woods. And the goal here is to get some additional money so that we can tell this amazing story and connect people with it in the rest of our area.
With also any mobile opportunities, or still just structural?
At this point, that phase is just for interpretive signage.
To give you a sense of the difficulties, one of the cannons, one of the largest, I think it was 2 tons, fell through the Hudson River ice when it was crossing the river. And although the train of cannon continued, there was a contingent of men with detail to get that cannon back. The bottom was the Hudson River and through the ice and back in transit to Boston, and they did it. I don't know how they did it. I can't imagine what the engineering was.
1775, there were not exactly a lot of big cranes around. And to get these things in the middle of the winter, which was December, when it fell through the ice, it was to get them to Boston, and they used, depending on whose version you believe, they were oxen that pulled the sleds. It was quite a heavy snow that winter. If it hadn't been snow, the cannons would never have gotten there, and we wouldn't speak it. Okay, anything else? Anybody win? It's a great project.
It's a great project.
These are stories.
I make it all up, Marty.
Me too. Now, Mark, National Heritage Area budget adoption.
Well, we took unfortunately, we separated it in the agenda, but that's the budget that we passed in the facilities business. So I think we're good. Again, $491,000 from the Friends of the National Heritage.
How does that compare to other years? And is that?
It's been pretty consistent. There is a little bit of contention within the National Heritage Area community in that the ones that are more newly designated don't receive as much. But so we're kind of perceived as the old guard here in Jersey. So we're getting way too much money. But we're thankful.
It was in jeopardy at one point, right?
It was, and we ran out of funding authority in 2012. Congress extended it for 2 years, and they included in the defense bill in December an extension through 2021. Congresswoman Senator Gillibrand had a bill in the Senate, and all of our members of Congress co-sponsored bills in the House, and they were able to get it in. However, Congress does it in the defense bill.
Anyone else got any questions?
He's a nice representative from Albany.
Congressman Tucker.
No, he's led the way on this. He's a historian, cares about it, and it's great.
Yes, well, I have the legislative updates next, and I want to recognize Congressman Taco as the co-chair of the National Heritage Areas Congressional Caucus in Congress. So he really represents our interests and the interests of the 48 other National Heritage Areas in Congress. He was instrumental in a number of things related to advocacy for heritage areas. In particular, right now, reintroducing H.R. 581, which is a bill called the National Heritage Areas Act of 2015, which will establish create a program for national heritage areas, which will help us alleviate this year-to-year budget game between Congress and the President, where we don't know what we're going to get. For example, this year, the proposed budget cuts our funding by 50%. And so we usually go through this dance about getting that money restored. And in part, this piece of legislation will help alleviate that circumstance, and will also help create uniform criteria for the establishment of new heritage areas and the measurement of existing heritage areas in terms of performance. So we currently have 3 sponsors of our congressional delegation on this bill, and we're going to get some additional folks on board. I'd also want to mention Nita Lowy.
Well, Nita Lowy has really been extraordinary. She's pretty powerful in Congress, and she's been a supporter of the Greenway since the very beginning. And
She, last year, she's the ranking member on appropriations for the minority. And last year, through a manager's amendment, which is a procedural step, she restored that 50% for all national heritage areas as an administrative move at the committee level. So we are certainly blessed to have somebody in that situation helping us and all the other national heritage areas across the country.
So 3 chairs for Taco and Lloyd. And I mean, it's not true, I mean, they really have been interested in history, and you're our resident historian.
No, they all should be Christ blessed, and let's see their numbers increase in terms of our special prayer.
No politics always.
So then, the path through history. So that's, that's coming up, June 20th and 21st. I really hope that everyone will try to go to at least one or more of the events. I think it's just such an incredibly exciting initiative that is now, what is it, in its third year in this iteration. And the idea that I Love New York has now partnered is just opening up huge opportunities for press, for awareness of it. But I think it's incumbent on each of us. Sometimes board members ask, what can we do to really play a role, help the Greenway, help the heritage area? And it really starts at something as basic as just making sure that you go to this, and then as the ramble comes, really try to make a point of it and get the word out. Anyway, Mark, you might want to add some.
The Greenway has been working closely with I Love New York and the Governor's Office on Path Through History and Path Through History weekends. This is our 3rd year partnering with the Greater Hudson Heritage Network to administer this program statewide. As of yesterday, there were about 310 events registered for Path Through History weekend, which is a great turnout. Most of the events, I don't think it's surprising, they are in the Hudson River Valley in terms of percentage. But they're really cool events. It's an event that's going to highlight New York State history and connect people with it, and that's what we really want to do. Sarah mentioned a compelling event at the Vanderbilt Mansion, where the carriage house is open for tours. There are a lot of those behind-the-scenes exclusive tours happening throughout the entire New York State. Johanna Ford passed out Newburgh Illuminated, which is a heritage festival happening in Newburgh, and I would encourage all of you to check it out. It's Father's Day weekend. Fathers love history. There are tons of great family-friendly events. I encourage you to check them out.
Great. And then moving on to the ramble, if you want.
And the ramble, now before Sarah talks about this, there wouldn't be a ramble if we didn't have Sarah. You brought the damn thing over for me.
Well, Path Through History, I think, is a little more of the connection. I can't take that much credit, and I can't even take credit for the Path Through History, but thank you.
All right, Ramble is going to be in our 16th year. This year, we're pleased to have a really significant sponsorship from I Love New York. They're investing $30,000 in marketing and advertising for the Ramble. That's going to increase our impact and our reach to promote the event significantly. It's almost going to double our marketing budget for that. The Estuary program is also our consistent sponsor for the Ramble program. In addition, we have this year the New York New Jersey Trail Conference. Thank you, Jane, and others from the Trail Conference for sponsoring, being a cash sponsor for Ramble. Many other agency partners are in-kind partners with the Ramble. Last year we had 155 events. We hope to have more than that this coming year. It really highlights all there is to offer in Hudson River Valley. A couple deadlines that you should be aware of. Registration deadline for events to be included in the printed materials is June 18th. Same deadline holds true for sponsors if you want to be included in the printed materials on the t-shirts and acknowledged on the website.
And where does sponsorship dollars, what are the financial requirements? Where do they start?
There are levels for everyone. Individual sponsorships start at $50, and the career sponsor, I think, tops out at $15,000. Sponsorship forms are on the registration table, I believe, outside, or certainly if you know of anybody or organizations that would be interested in sponsoring, I can certainly send you that information.
And again, that's something that board members with their connections and hopefully their promoting of this event can help as well to try to get us sponsors. So So, all right, so then we move on to your executive director's report. That's one of my favorite parts to read in advance of the meetings. It's just always astonishing to see how much Mark is able to accomplish each quarter with his wonderful, wonderful staff. But why don't you share some highlights, Mark?
Well, thanks, Sarah. We've had a quite exciting quarter at the Greenway in the National Heritage Area. We announced the grants at awards that we made in March at a couple press events that happened, one in April with Congressman Lowy down at Lyndhurst Castle. And we just had one last Friday with Congressman Tonko and other elected officials at Tenbrook Mansion in Albany. Both were very successful. The grantees and politicians in particular love to come out when there are big novelty checks involved in the photograph. So we were pleased about that. We also sponsored a really cool event that we hope to emulate elsewhere in the Valley, and perhaps working with you, Johanna. It was our inaugural History Happy Hour in Albany. We are a partner with a number of organizations in the Capital District, and the goal of this event is to provide a networking opportunity for people that are involved in the industry of heritage tourism, and also people that really like heritage tourism or historic sites, to give them another reason to go and visit it. So our inaugural History Happy Hour was at the Albany Institute for History and Art. We had, I think, over 80 people in attendance. And we plan to have our second version of that program at Schuyler Mansion in Albany. And again, I hope to emulate that program working with other partners in the Hudson River Valley. We were also an inaugural sponsor of the first annual Hudson Valley Heritage Fair. It was held at Locust Grove in Poughkeepsie. It was a partnership project between our heritage area, the Greater Hudson Heritage Network, the Dutchess County Historian, the Mid-Hudson Path Through History Work Group, the Museum Association of New York, Dutch Spirits, and many other partners that participated in the event. At the end of the program, we also sponsored a speaker, Frank Vangioni, who runs the Historic House Trust of New York City. He gave a presentation on the Anarchist Guide to the Historic House Museum. It's an attempt to get people to think more broadly and expansively about how to use these historic spaces in new ways to engage new audiences and to get existing audiences another reason to come back. And again, that kind of networking and also professional development element is something that we hope to emulate in future programming, working with partners elsewhere in the Valley. We are reprinting our National Heritage Area Heritage Site Guidebook. I included a screenshot of what it's going to look like. I think that guidebook has netted us $18,000 roughly. Grossed us $18,000 roughly?
No, we've grossed about 12,000.
12,000. What we've learned last time is our first foray into publishing is that our price point for that was way too low. So we're increasing our retail price for the new guidebook, and this is talking with our consultants about this, from $9.99 to $19.99, and we think we'll be able to increase the margin on sales for retail and wholesale price. I believe Sarah Olson mentioned the upcoming Teaching the Hudson Valley Institute. We are a proud sponsor of Teaching the Hudson Valley, and the Institute's going to be held right here on July 28th and 30th. A compelling program focusing on how we teach for engagement, particularly as we look to the next 100 years in terms of sustainability and other things that engage folks. I think many of the other things were covered that were in my executive director's report and other elements of the presentation today. As always, I'd really like to thank my incredible staff, Scott, Tristan, Dan, Chanel, for putting everything together and really making the program and all the things that we do possible. Please join me in thanking them.
That, I believe, concludes our meetings. We meet again October 14th. Sarah Olson, you invited us back?
Absolutely.
Yes, we'll be back here, right? October 14th, you know?
Yes.
Back here, same place.
All right. So thank you all very much.
And we'll have a management committee meeting for the National Heritage Area starting at 12:30, right here. Same place. Thanks, everyone.